Hello, my name is Dr. Mark Wally. I'm a senior lecturer in educational leadership at the University of Chester. And this video is about some research that I've been doing over the last 18 months. Just a bit of background for you that before I became a senior lecturer at Chester, I've spent a career in education. I've been a classroom physics teacher, middle leader, a senior leader, and I've also been a head teacher in a number of schools. This is important as some of the things I'm going to talk about in this video actually relate to issues around leadership, and so some of my ideas are grounded in experience. So my research interest is in teacher retention and job satisfaction, and the studies I'm going to talk about are actually about physics teachers. However, please don't turn off. The findings that have come out of this research really can be applied across the entire teaching profession. So I hope that if you bear with me through this video, you're going to find out something useful that may be implementable in your own settings. So over the last 18 months or so, I've undertaken two studies, and those have resulted in two papers, both published in SSR In Depth. That's the Association for Science Education's in-depth journal of science research. One of those papers has been produced with Ian Horswell from the Institute of Physics, and the other paper reports on research that was supported by the Ogden Trust. Just a little bit of background. Teacher recruitment and retention is an enormous issue in England, as I'm sure we all know. Every year, 9 or 10% of teachers leave the profession, and you can keep up to date on this with the NFER website on which they have current data. That's a worrying enough statistic. But over recent years, the DFE's own data has shown that only 8% of those who actually leave teaching are doing so for reasons of retirement. 10 or 11 years ago, that was 30%. So it means that 92% of those who have left teaching have done so for other reasons. Now, obviously, some have left for positive reasons, but one can surmise that quite a large proportion may well have left for more negative reasons. Okay, so let's get into the research, and we'll start off with the piece of work done with Ian at the Institute of Physics. In this study, we were looking at the experiences, the job satisfaction and the career intentions of physics teachers in their first 5 years of teaching. What we did is we surveyed, in the end, 95 teachers who were teaching in state schools in England, and we asked them a series of questions about job satisfaction and about their career intentions. Measuring their satisfaction or otherwise, we were able to find out which factors have the most negative impact on their job satisfaction. It may not come as a surprise, but those factors in order of importance, and we gave them a choice, I should say, of well over 20 different factors, were firstly salary, secondly workload, both planning and marking, thirdly student behaviour, fourthly perceived poor leadership. And I will just say here that we are talking about perceptions of poor leadership. Regularly in those first 5 years, it may be more questionable whether or not teachers are able to make judgments about the quality of leadership, but they're certainly in a position to know how it feels to be led. And the final thing was flexible working. We'll come back to those later on when we look at the other research. But there's also a very interesting correlation, because we asked the teachers how likely they were to consider leaving teaching. And alarmingly, 32% of the teachers that we surveyed were seriously considering leaving, 4 of whom had already resigned from their posts when we, in fact, conducted the survey. There was an interesting and concerning correlation. There's a strong correlation between those teachers considering leaving and the dissatisfaction that they found from having to teach out of specialism. In other words, we've got physics teachers who are teaching biology and chemistry and so on. So these findings about job satisfaction are really important. But it's when they're coupled with the findings from the second piece of research that I think they shed really interesting light on practice and give us some implications for the future. The second study was supported by the physics education charity, the Ogden Trust. This was fundamentally different. In this, we were looking at the experiences of those who had left teaching. We conducted a series of interviews with teachers who had left teaching in the last 2 years, having taught in a state school in England, and they'd left for reasons other than retirement. The interviews gave me the opportunity to dig in depth into their reasons behind leaving. And 6 main areas jumped out as being the key reasons why they left. The first one was the actions of senior leaders and lack of recognition. It's about feeling valued. Now, I should say that these teachers go from those with experience of only a few years to those with several decades. So those with extended experiences of teaching are going to have lots of experience and be able to make some of these judgments. So the second reason that they gave for why they left was about the excessive accountability. The excessive accountability, which to most of the teachers I interviewed appeared to be, in truth, over the top. We all appreciate that accountability is important in any profession. However, they'd reached the point where they felt it was a stick with which to beat them. The third area, which contributed significantly to their decisions to leave, was that around autonomy and professional agency. It was that excessive direction about how to teach, how to plan, the way to manage behavior and so on. And rather than trusting in the judgment of the individual, school-wide and mat-wide policies were being applied indiscriminately. And these teachers felt that this was undermining their professionalism. This is a factor that can't be understated. When a professional's sense of professionalism is undermined, it impacts on their professional identity. And research from OECD has linked the importance of professional identity of teachers to their retention within the profession. The fourth issue won't come as a great surprise. It is workload, but not just any workload. It's about the workload which is perceived as being less meaningful. Teachers understand that this is a busy job. They understand there's a great deal that they have to do. And they don't resent that as long as that work is meaningful and has moral purpose. Unfortunately, the teachers in my sample were reporting having to do work which largely felt possibly pointless, but certainly not having an immediate and direct impact on the outcomes and well-being of students. The fifth reason was teacher well-being. They felt that both their mental health and at times their physical health was being affected by the job and by the actions of the schools was contributing to negative well-being. And on this, I would also say it's well worth consulting the annual Teacher Wellbeing Index, which the Education Support Organisation produced, and that's available on the internet. The final reason they left, and this was a very interesting one as well, because it was only expressed by those who had the least experience in the sample, was salary. Understanding that with teachers, especially of physics, that there is a pay gap between what you can earn in teaching and what can be earned in physics-related professions outside of teaching. So from this, I've drawn some conclusions. The first is a hypothesis, which I would like to share with you, and it's one that deserves testing. After the interviews, I came to think that there may be 3 routes out of teaching which teachers pursue. The first is the most natural one. Ones where teachers leave teaching either for retirement or for positive opportunities. However, the other 2 require a little more scrutiny. I do believe that teachers leave the profession just because of a slow accumulation of dissatisfaction over many years, and they reach the point where they think, I'd no longer want to teach. However, the third reason is what comes out of this research. That the teachers I interviewed all reported that during their teaching careers, whether long or quite short, they were dissatisfied, and that dissatisfaction had increased. But what actually ended their career was something a bit more specific, a tipping point. Call it a catastrophe. Now, that might have been a one-off incident, which was the final straw. Or it may have been something which was slightly longer in scope, maybe the introduction of a policy, a change in management procedure, whatever it was. But that was the issue. And so I've come away from this research thinking that teachers become pressurized with dissatisfaction. And what we need to do is depressurize that system. One can think of it with almost a medical model, that teachers become frail. Now, I don't mean physically frail, but frail due to dissatisfaction. And it only requires possibly even quite a small incident for them to trip. And it's that becomes catastrophic and signals the end of a teaching career. These sorts of incidents happen. We can't deny that. So therefore, improving job satisfaction will depressurize the system. And by doing that, my hypothesis is that it means it's more likely that teachers will remain in the profession. Now, what can we do about this? Some of the things I've said are beyond the scope of school leadership. Salary, for instance, is a very difficult one really to manage with having funding envelopes determined elsewhere. But I would argue what I'm about to suggest are within the gift to a great extent of school and possibly MAT leaders. The first is focus on agency. Recognize the professionalism of those who work in your schools. Give them agency. What I'm not saying is don't necessarily confuse agency and autonomy. Teachers can't just teach what they want, how they want, when they want, but give teachers more latitude to actually do the job in the way that they know they can do it, possibly with that associated support that they may need. But nevertheless, they are the captains of their classroom. Secondly, sensible accountability. Everyone knows that everybody in the workplace needs to have a level of accountability. We are accountable. We're accountable to the taxpayer. We're accountable to parents. We're accountable to the students. Accountability matters. However, remember that you don't fatten the pig by constantly weighing the pig. Don't measure just for the sake of measurement. Make your metrics meaningful, and when they are happening, have them having a purpose which is shared with colleagues. The third one is workload. Again, nobody enters teaching thinking that workload is low, but the meaningful nature of work is important. One practical measure that can be considered, and this follows work that the Institute of Physics have actually done in a project called Keep Teaching, is that of matched timetables. I think this is very relevant, especially in subjects like modern foreign languages, technology and science, where you have subjects which are multidisciplinary. So in modern foreign languages, you may have French, German and Spanish there, but you are relying on a subject specialist in French to teach German. In science, it's common. Biology teachers teach physics, physics teachers teach chemistry, so on and so forth. What we believe is that by either or both using a teacher's specialism to its full extent is clearly beneficial, but also, especially with teachers at the earlier stages of their career, give them repeat classes. I appreciate, having been a head of science and a school timetabler, that there are times it's impossible to allow a teacher to teach purely within their dedicated specialism. However, if you give them repeat classes, especially early on in their career, it means it reduces the planning and it allows them to develop their teaching practice. Fourthly, have that focus on well-being. Teachers' well-being should be front and center of an organization. You can justify this from a business perspective, a legal perspective, and a moral perspective. Looking after your staff is crucial. It's worth noting that some teachers have talked about the lack of flexible working opportunities. Again, as a former timetabler, I know how difficult that can be to achieve. However, in the post-COVID world, graduates entering a range of professions are looking for ways to work flexibly. And if we can't at least investigate flexible working, we may be closing the door to graduates who would otherwise like to be teachers. It also gives us the opportunity to attract those who may wish to return to the profession, having previously left it, and bring back their passion for our subjects and their expertise in the classroom. I hope you found this useful. At the end of this, I will give you some contact details. Thank you for watching. And if you'd like to talk to me about this or anything around teacher retention research, I'd be delighted to hear from you. Thank you.